The linen napkin on my lap felt heavier than lead. It was white, crisp, and smelled faintly of lavender and old money, the signature scent of the Crestwood Country Club. Around us, the low hum of polite conversation masked the sound of silverware scraping against fine china, a symphony of wealthy people pretending their lives were perfect. My father, Richard, checked his Rolex for the third time in 5 minutes. It was a subtle gesture, a flick of the wrist that screamed impatience. He didn't look at me. He never really looked at me. His gaze was fixed on the entrance, ensuring that anyone of importance saw the Sterling family dining together. My mother, Catherine, sat opposite him, her spine as rigid as a steel rod. She was smiling, that practiced, tight-lipped expression she reserved for charity galas and uncomfortable family moments. She reached out and adjusted the pearl necklace at her throat, her fingers moving with a nervous, bird-like energy. "Grace, darling," she said, her voice dropping to that hushed, conspiratorial tone that usually preceded an insult wrapped in sugar. "You look tired. Are you eating enough? That sweater hangs off you like a sack." I looked down at my gray cashmere sweater. It was high quality, practical, and clean. But to Catherine Sterling, anything that didn't scream designer label was an affront to her existence. "I'm fine, Mother," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Work has just been intense." "Work?" my sister Madison snorted from my left. She didn't look up from her phone. Her thumb was scrolling furiously through Instagram, her acrylic nails clicking against the screen. Madison was 30, 2 years younger than me, but she still lived in the east wing of our parents' estate. She was an influencer, which in the Sterling household meant she spent our parents' money to look busy. "Playing in the dirt isn't work, Grace. It's a hobby." "It's agricultural technology, Madison," I corrected automatically, though I knew it was useless. "We analyze soil composition to optimize crop yields for—" "Boring," Madison sang out, finally setting her phone down. But she didn't lock the screen. I noticed the camera app was open. She propped it against the water glass, angling it perfectly to capture the table, to capture me. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just a dinner. This was a production. My father cleared his throat. The sound was sharp, demanding silence. He placed his fork down with precise deliberation. "Grace," he began, his voice booming slightly, the voice he used when denying a loan application back in his banking days. "We need to discuss your future." I gripped the stem of my water glass. "My future?" "We love you," my mother interjected quickly, reaching across the table to pat my hand. Her skin was cold. "You know that, don't you? We only want what's best for you, and it pains us to see you struggling like this." "Struggling?" I repeated. "Drifting," my father corrected. "You're 32 years old, Grace. You have no husband, no real career, and you drive a car that belongs in a scrapyard. You're an embarrassment to yourself and, frankly, to this family." The words hit me like physical blows, practiced and precise. They knew exactly where to strike. "We've made a decision," Richard continued, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a thin velvet envelope and slid it across the white tablecloth. It stopped right next to my butter knife. I stared at it. "What is this?" "Freedom," Madison grinned, her eyes glinting with malice. She checked her phone screen again, ensuring the frame was focused. I opened the envelope. Inside lay a single piece of paper and a check. The paper was a plane ticket, one way, to Austin, Texas. The check was made out to Grace Sterling. The amount, $5,000. I looked up, confusion warring with a rising sense of nausea. "I don't understand." It's a severance package, effectively, my father said, leaning back as if he had just solved a complex equation. We are cutting you off, Grace, financially and geographically. You need a fresh start, somewhere far away from here, where you can't rely on the sterling name to bail you out of your mediocrity. We're selling the house eventually, my mother added, her eyes misty with fake tears. We're downsizing. There just isn't room for you anymore. And Madison needs your old room for her studio. You understand, don't you? She's actually building a brand. The implication hung in the air. She is building something. You are nothing. You want me to leave? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Forever? It's for your own good, my father said, his tone final. Take the money. Go to Austin. Find a job as whatever it is you do. A gardener? Just do it somewhere else. I looked at the check again. $5,000. To them, this was charity, a bone thrown to a stray dog to get it off the porch. To me, it was something else entirely. It was an insult. It was a dismissal of my entire existence. But as I looked at the check, I saw something they didn't. I saw the date. I saw the signature. And I felt a strange, cold sensation wash over me. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't the crushing weight of rejection I had felt for decades. It was clarity. For years, I had craved their approval. I had worked myself to the bone, studying late into the night, building algorithms, sleeping in my lab, all to prove that I was worthy of the name Sterling. And here they were, paying me $5,000 to vanish. They thought I was destitute. They thought I was a failure. They had no idea what I had done 48 hours ago. I looked at Madison's phone, noticing the tiny red dot indicating she was recording. I looked at my mother's fake concern. I looked at my father's arrogance. A smile tugged at the corner of my lips. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who realizes the trap has been sprung, but the hunter is actually the prey. "Thank you," I said softly. My father blinked. He had expected begging. He had expected tears. He had wanted a scene. "Excuse me?" I said, "Thank you." I repeated, my voice stronger. I reached out and picked up the check. "You're right, Dad. It is time for a change. A big one." I folded the check and placed it in my purse. "Excellent," Richard said, though he looked unsettled. "Well, that went better than expected." "Wait," Madison whispered, gesturing to the phone. She mouthed at me, "Cry, you loser." I didn't cry. I simply took a sip of water, the ice clinking softly against the glass. The coolness spread through my chest, freezing the last remnants of my love for these people. "Thank you for being here with me at this table. It's hard to relive this, but I need you to understand what comes next. Please, take a second to comment down below. Tell me which city you're listening from. It helps me feel less alone in telling this story." The smell of the country club, that mix of chlorine, gin, and expensive perfume, triggered a memory so vivid it almost made me gag on my water. I was back in the summer of 2014. I was 22, fresh out of undergrad, living in the pool house because my parents didn't want clutter in the main residence. I had spent the entire day at the county wetlands collecting soil samples for my thesis. I was covered in muck. My boots were caked with clay, my hair was frizzy from the humidity, and I smelled like a swamp. But I was happy. I had found a correlation between nitrate levels and root rot that could save local farmers thousands of dollars. I had rushed home, bursting with excitement, wanting to share the news. I walked through the garden gate, cutting across the perfectly manicured lawn toward the back patio. I didn't see the party until it was too late. My parents were hosting the White Gala, a charity event for the local art museum. Everyone was dressed in white linen and silk. They held champagne flutes and laughed with their heads thrown back. I froze. I was a dark, muddy blot on their pristine canvas. "Oh, my heavens," a voice drawled. It was Mrs. Vanderselt, the wife of the mayor. She pointed at me with a manicured finger. "Catherine, you didn't tell me you hired a new girl for the landscaping." My mother turned. Her eyes widened, not with concern, but with horror. She looked at me like I was a cockroach that had scurried across a wedding cake. I opened my mouth to speak, to say, "Hi, Mrs. Vanderselt. It's me, Grace." But my father was faster. He stepped between me and the guests, his back rigid. He didn't look at me. He spoke to the crowd, his voice smooth and jovial. "Ah, yes. Hard to find good help these days. Excuse us a moment." He walked over to me, his smile fixed for the guests, but his eyes were shards of ice. He gripped my upper arm, his fingers digging into my bicep hard enough to bruise. "Get out of sight," he hissed through his teeth. "Now." "Dad, I found the data pattern. I wanted to tell you." "I don't care about your dirt, Grace," he whispered, the venom in his voice making me recoil. "Look at you. You look like a peasant. Mr. Harrison is here, the CEO of ChemCorp. If he sees my daughter looking like a vagrant, what does that say about me? What does that say about this family?" "But I'm not a vagrant. I'm a scientist," I pleaded, tears stinging my eyes. "You're an embarrassment," he spat. "Go to the servants' entrance, go to your room, and do not come out until these people leave." He shoved me, lightly, but enough to make me stumble. As I retreated, humiliated, dragging my muddy boots across the stone path, I heard Mrs. Vanderselt ask, "Who was that filthy girl, Richard?" And I heard my father's reply. It was clear as day. "Oh, just the gardener's assistant. A bit slow, poor thing. We try to give jobs to the less fortunate." Laughter rippled through the crowd. I ran to the pool house, stripped off my clothes, and stood under the scalding shower for an hour, scrubbing my skin until it was raw. I tried to wash away the mud, but I couldn't wash away the shame. That night, Madison came into my room. She was wearing a white silk dress that cost more than my entire semester's tuition. She held a plate of leftover hors d'oeuvres, cold shrimp and soggy crackers. "Mom said you could have these," she said, dropping the plate on my desk right on top of my research notes. Grease stained the paper. "Thanks," I mumbled. "Dad was really mad," Madison said, leaning against the doorframe, examining her reflection in my mirror. "You really ruined the vibe, Grace. Why can't you just be normal? Why do you have to be so dirty?" "I'm working, Madison. I'm trying to do something important." She laughed. It was a tinkling, cruel sound. "Important? Grace, nobody cares about dirt. Dad says you're wasting your life. He says you're going to end up alone with dirty fingernails and no money." She turned to leave, then paused. "By the way, Mom turned your heat off out here to save electricity, since you're not contributing to the household bills." I slept in my winter coat that night. I was 22, brilliant and driven, but to them, I was just the help, the slow girl, the disappointment. Back in the restaurant, staring at the $5,000 check, that memory burned in my chest. The gardener's assistant. My father hadn't just rejected me tonight, he had rejected me 10 years ago. He had rejected me every single day of my life. The realization hardened something inside me. The last tiny, pathetic part of me that still wanted to be Daddy's little girl finally died. It shriveled up and blew away like dust. I looked at Richard Sterling, the man who would lie to his friends rather than admit his daughter worked with her hands. "You wanted a stranger," I thought. "Congratulations, Dad. You're about to meet one." To understand why I didn't throw that check in my father's face, you have to go back 48 hours. While my mother was likely debating which tablecloths to use for my intervention dinner, I was sitting in a glass-walled conference room on the 40th floor of the Willis Tower in Chicago. The room smelled of espresso and expensive leather. Across from me sat Julian Vance, the CEO of Agricor, one of the largest agricultural conglomerates in the world. Next to him were 3 lawyers in suits that cost more than my car. I was wearing my lucky blazer, a thrift store find I'd tailored myself, and my boots still had a faint trace of dust from the field tests in Fresno. "Your algorithm is aggressive, Miss Sterling," Julian said. He was a man who didn't waste words. He tapped the tablet in front of him. TerraSense. It predicts soil nutrient depletion with 94% accuracy. That's 3 years ahead of our R&D department. 96%, I corrected him, my voice steady. In the lab, I was never shy, if you account for the microclimate variables I added in the last patch. Julian looked at me over the rim of his glasses. For a second, I felt that old fear, the fear that I was about to be scolded, told to go to the servants' entrance. Then he smiled. 96. Remarkable. He slid a heavy document across the mahogany sable. "We're done dancing, Grace. We want TerraSense. We want the code, the patent, and we want you. We want you to lead the sustainability division." I looked down at the contract. The numbers blurred for a second. Purchase price, $8,500,000 USD. Signing bonus, $250,000 USD. Annual salary, $400,000 USD plus stock options. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I thought about the ramen noodles I had eaten for dinner for the last 6 months. I thought about the duct tape holding my side view mirror onto my Toyota. I thought about the time my father refused to co-sign a $5,000 business loan because women in science are a bad investment. "Is the offer acceptable?" Julian asked. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. "The offer is acceptable, Mr. Vance, on one condition. Name it." "Nobody knows," I said. "Not yet. I need the press release held until the Forbes article drops next week, and I need the funds wired to a secure account under my LLC, not my personal name." Julian raised an eyebrow. "Family trouble?" He was sharp. "Something like that," I said. "I just want to close a chapter before I start this new one." "Done," Julian said. I signed the papers. Grace Sterling. The ink looked black and permanent. 2 hours later, I was sitting in my beat-up car in the parking garage. My phone pinged. A notification from my bank. Deposit received. $8,750,000.00. Current balance, $8,750,412.38. I stared at the screen. I screenshotted it. Then I cried. Not happy tears, relief tears. Ugly, sobbing, heaving tears that shook my whole body. I had done it. Without their money, without their connections, without their name opening doors for me. In fact, I had done it in spite of them. I drove home to the small, rented guest house I was staying in. I had moved out of my parents' place years ago, but visited often out of guilt. I didn't buy champagne. I didn't call anyone. I sat on my floor and ate a peanut butter sandwich, knowing I was richer than my father had ever been in his entire life. Richard Sterling liked to act rich. He leased his cars. He leveraged his properties. He lived on credit and appearances. I knew this because I had overheard his frantic phone calls with his accountant. The walls of our estate were thin. But I was liquid. I was free. And that brought us back to the dinner table. When my father slid that $5,000 check toward me, he wasn't just insulting me. He was handing me a prop for the greatest comedy sketch of my life. He thought he was holding all the cards. He thought he was the king banishing the peasant. He didn't know the peasant had just bought the kingdom. Well, My mother asked, her patience thinning. Grace, don't just stare at us. Say something. I snapped back to the present. The country club, the lavender smell, the camera lens pointed at my face. I need to sign something, don't I? I asked calmly. Dad doesn't give money without paperwork. Richard looked surprised, then pleased. He pulled a second sheet of paper from his jacket. You're learning. Yes, this is a standard release form. It states that by accepting this financial assistance, this severance gift, you relinquish any future claims to financial support from the Sterling family estate. It also stipulates that you will vacate the premises within 24 hours. And the car? I asked. The Toyota is in your name, unfortunately, he sneered. You can take that scrap heap with you to Texas. I reached for the pen he offered. It was a Mont Blanc, heavy and black. Wait, Madison said, adjusting her phone. Do it again. Look sadder. Like, look at Mom and say, you're sorry for letting us down. I looked at Madison, really looked at her. She was 30 years old, trapping herself in a cage of likes and filters. She was drowning in debt. I knew she owed 3 different credit cards max limits because I had seen the collection notices she tried to hide in the trash. She needed me to be the failure so she could feel like a success. I'm not sorry, Madison, I said, my voice clear, and I'm not sad. I signed the paper. Grace Sterling. The same signature I had used on the $8.5 million contract just 2 days ago. The contrast made me giddy. I pushed the paper back to my father. There, I said, I relinquish everything. You don't owe me a dime. I don't owe you a visit. We're done. My mother frowned. The script wasn't being followed. I was supposed to beg. I was supposed to ask how I would survive. You have a place to stay tonight? She asked, feigning concern. We can't have you sleeping in your car. What would people say? I'll be fine, I said. I stood up. My legs felt steady, strong. Where are you going? Richard demanded. We haven't ordered dessert. It looks bad if you leave early. I'm leaving for Austin, remember? I lied. I have to pack. I picked up my purse. I looked at the 3 of them one last time. A tableau of toxicity. Dad, I said. What? Make sure you cash that check soon, I said, referring to a small reimbursement check I had written him weeks ago for a shared phone bill plan I was still on. I wouldn't want it to bounce. He scoffed. Please. As if I need your $40. Goodbye, Mother, I said. Madison, good luck with your brand. I turned and walked away. I could feel their eyes boring into my back. I could feel the eyes of the other diners. She's probably on drugs, I heard Madison whisper loudly to her live stream. Guys, it's so hard dealing with an unstable sibling. Send hearts if you support my family right now. I walked out of the double doors into the cool night air. The valet brought my dented Toyota around. Rough night, Miss Sterling? The valet asked. He was a nice kid named Leo. Actually, Leo, I said, handing him a $100 bill, the first cash I had withdrawn from my new account, it's the best night of my life. I didn't drive to my apartment to pack. I had already packed everything that mattered into 2 boxes in my trunk earlier that day. I drove straight to the Four Seasons downtown. I walked up to the front desk. My sweater was cheap, my jeans were worn, but my credit card was black titanium, sent overnight by Julian's team. I'd like a suite, I told the receptionist, with a view of the lake and room service. I want the most expensive champagne you have. The receptionist glanced at my clothes, hesitated, then swiped the card. When it approved, her eyebrows shot up. Right away, Miss Sterling. Welcome home. I went up to the room. It was bigger than the entire guest house I had been living in. I stood by the window, looking down at the city lights. I pulled the $5,000 check from my purse. I took a picture of it. Then I opened the hotel safe, placed the check inside, and locked it. I wasn't going to cash it. Not yet. This check was evidence. It was the receipt. and when the time came, it was going to be the weapon that destroyed them. The next morning, I woke up in 800 thread count sheets. For a moment, I panicked, thinking I had overslept for my lab work. Then I remembered I didn't have a lab shift. I owned the lab. I ordered breakfast, eggs Benedict, fresh fruit, coffee that didn't taste like burnt rubber. I felt peace. Then I made the mistake of opening my phone. My notifications were blown up, hundreds of tags, thousands of comments. Madison had posted the video. She had edited it, of course. She had cut out my father's cruel remarks. She had cut out the gardener comments. The video showed a tight close-up of my face, looking stoic and cold. Caption: my parents literally gave my sister $5,000 and a plane ticket to save her life, and she didn't even say thank you, just grabbed the money and ran. Hashtag ungrateful, family drama, addiction awareness. Addiction awareness? I had never touched a drug in my life. She was implying I was an addict to explain my behavior. I scrolled through the comments. User 123. Wow, what a brat. She looks like she smells. Mama Bear 55. Your parents are saints. If my daughter treated me like that, I'd cut her off with nothing. Rich Kid Probs. She probably spent it all on meth already. My stomach turned. They were painting a narrative, and the world was eating it up. Madison was playing the victim, the suffering sister dealing with the black sheep. My first instinct was to reply, to scream, to post my bank balance. No, I told myself, stop. I remembered Julian's advice. Strategy, Grace, not emotion. I kicked up the hotel phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Sarah Jenkins, a sharp voice answered. Sarah, it's Grace Sterling. There was a pause. Sarah had been my roommate freshman year of college before she transferred to pre-law. She was the nastiest, most brilliant shark I had ever met. We had drifted apart because my parents disapproved of her. Too loud, too aggressive. Grace, Sarah's tone softened, then sharpened again. I saw the video. Madison is a bitch. I exhaled. I need to hire you. Honey, unless you have a retainer, I'm expensive. And from the looks of that video, I can afford you, I cut in. I just sold my company for $8.5 million. Dead silence on the line. Say that again? I need you to come to the Four Seasons, Suite 401. Bring a notepad and maybe a cease and desist template. I'm on my way, Sarah said, the smile audible in her voice. Don't say a word to anyone until I get there. While I waited for Sarah, I watched the view count on Madison's video tick up. 50K views, 100K views. My mother commented, "We just pray she finds peace. We tried everything." My father liked the comment. They were enjoying this. They were basking in the sympathy of strangers. They were building their reputation as long-suffering martyrs on the pyre of my reputation. Let them have their moment. Because tomorrow was Tuesday, and on Tuesday, Forbes hit the newsstands. Tuesday morning arrived with a thunderstorm. The sky over Chicago was bruised purple and gray. It matched my mood perfectly. I sat in the hotel suite living room. Sarah was on the sofa, her laptop open, a cup of coffee in her hand. She looked like a predator waiting for a gazelle to limp by. "It's live," she said, refreshing her browser. I opened my iPad. There it was, Forbes.com. The headline took up the entire banner. The Soil Whisperer, how 32-year-old Grace Sterling sold her agritech startup for $8.5 million. The photo was one Julian's team had taken in the studio. I looked fierce. I was wearing a black turtleneck, arms crossed, staring directly into the camera. No dirt, no shame, just power. The article detailed everything: my research, the sleepless nights, the innovative code that was revolutionizing sustainable farming. It mentioned the acquisition by Agricor. It mentioned my new role as Director of Sustainability. It did not mention the Sterling family. Not once. "It's beautiful," Sarah whispered. Then the phone started. First, it was a text from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. "Oh my God, Grace, is this real?" Then a call from an old college professor. And then the ringtone of doom. Dad calling. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. Mom calling. I let it ring. Madison calling. I declined it. My phone vibrated so hard on the glass table, it sounded like an angry hornet. 3 missed calls, 10 missed calls, 27 missed calls. "They're panicking," Sarah noted, taking a sip of coffee. "They're realizing they just kicked the winning lottery ticket out of their house." I finally picked up the phone when I saw the voicemail transcription from my father pop up on the screen. "Grace, pick up the phone immediately. We saw the article. There must be some mistake. Why didn't you tell us? We're family. We need to manage this together. Call me now." "Manage this," I scoffed. "He wants to control the narrative." "He wants the money," Sarah corrected. "Grace, did you cash the $5,000 check?" "No, it's in the safe." "Good, don't touch it." "That check is proof they tried to buy you out of the family for pennies. If you cash it, they could argue you accepted their terms." My phone dinged again. A new notification from Instagram. Madison had tagged me in a story. I opened it. Madison was crying, but these weren't the fake tears from the dinner. Her face was blotchy, her mascara running. She looked genuinely terrified. "Guys," she sobbed into the camera, "please stop sending hate comments. There was a misunderstanding. My sister, we love her so much. We were just trying to help her. We didn't know." The comments on her previous video, the one bashing me, had turned. User 99, "Wait, she's a millionaire genius and you treated her like trash? Justice for Grace. This family is toxic. She invented tech to save the planet, and you mocked her? Truth seeker, I hope she sues you for defamation." The internet is a fickle beast. Yesterday, I was the villain. Today, I was the hero, and my family was being eaten alive. "Are you going to answer them?" Sarah asked. I looked at the phone. My father was calling again. "No," I said. "I'm going to work." I stood up, smoothing my blazer. "I have a meeting with Julian. We're discussing the expansion into Southeast Asia. My family can wait." "They won't wait long," Sarah warned. "People like Richard Sterling don't get embarrassed and walk away. They get embarrassed and they get litigious." "Let them come," I said, grabbing my bag. "I have the receipts." Sarah was right. They didn't wait long. 3 days later, I was in my new office at Agricor. It was beautiful, minimalist, filled with plants, overlooking the Chicago River. I was in the middle of a meeting with my engineering team when my assistant, Leo, yes, I hired the valet from the country club, he was studying engineering and needed an internship, knocked on the door. "Grace," he said, looking nervous, "there are people here to see you. Security stopped them in the lobby, but they're making a scene." I checked the lobby camera feed on my monitor. There they were, Richard, Catherine, and Madison. Richard was shouting at the security guard, pointing at his chest. Catherine was looking around the lobby as if she was appraising the furniture. Madison was, surprise, filming. "Let them up," I said into the intercom. "But bring them to conference room B, not my office." I walked into conference room B 5 minutes later. Sarah was already there on speakerphone. I wasn't doing this without a witness. When I entered, the energy in the room shifted. My father stood up, arms wide, a beaming smile on his face. It was the white gala smile, fake, terrifying. "Grace," he boomed, "my brilliant girl. Look at this place. We are so proud. We've been trying to reach you for days." My mother rushed forward to hug me. I sidestepped her. She hugged the air, stumbling slightly. "Sit down," I said coldly. They faltered. The dynamic had flipped. I wasn't the daughter in the dirty boots anymore. I was the director. This was my turf. "Grace, honey," my mother began, sitting down nervously. "We were just so shocked. Why didn't you tell us?" I said. "You were too busy telling me I was a failure and handing me a plane ticket." "Oh, that," Richard waved his hand dismissively. "That was just motivation, reverse psychology. We knew you had it in you. We wanted to push you to greatness." "You kicked me out, Dad." "Details," he said. Then his eyes hardened. The mask slipped. "Now, let's talk business. We've been speaking with our lawyers." "I have a lawyer too," I said, pointing to the speakerphone. "Say hi to Sarah." "Hi, Richard." Sarah's voice crackled, dripping with sarcasm. Richard ignored her. "Grace, we need to discuss the distribution of assets. You see, the $5,000 we gave you, that wasn't just a gift, that was an investment." "Seed money?" I stared at him. "Seed money?" "Exactly," he said, leaning forward. "Technically, by accepting that capital during the formative stages of your company, or rather, just before the sale, the Sterling estate became a silent partner. We've done the math. We believe a 30% stake in the sale price is fair. That's roughly $2.5 million. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was a bark of pure incredulity. "You're joking? You gave me that money after I sold the company, and you gave it to me to leave." "We gave you financial support throughout your life," my mother chimed in, her voice shrill. "The roof over your head, the food. We supported your little hobby." "You charged me rent to live in the pool house," I reminded her, "and you cut off my electricity." "We are family!" Madison shouted, slamming her hand on the table. "You can't just keep $8 million and let us suffer. Do you know how much credit card debt I have? Do you know Daddy is behind on the mortgage?" The room went silent. Richard turned to Madison, his face purple. "Shut up, Madison." "Mortgage?" I asked. "I thought the house was paid off years ago." Business has been slow," Richard muttered, adjusting his tie. "Look, Grace, be reasonable. We are your blood. You owe us. That check was a contract." "You want to talk about that check?" I asked. I pulled out my phone. "Leo, bring in the file." Leo walked in carrying a thick folder. He placed it in front of me. "That check wasn't an investment," I said, opening the folder. "And I have the receipts to prove it." My father looked at the folder. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. "What is that?" "This," I said, tapping the folder, "is what I like to call the Pandora's box of the Sterling family." I opened the first page. "Exhibit A," I announced, "an email from you, Dad, dated August 12, 2018. I asked you for a $100 loan to buy specific reagents for my first prototype. You replied, 'Grace, I will not throw good money after bad. Your agricultural trash is a waste of time. Get a real job.' That doesn't sound like an investor to me." My father paled. "That was taken out of context." I flipped the page. Exhibit B, a voicemail transcript from Mom, Christmas 2020. "Grace, don't talk about your dirt experiments at dinner. It bores the guests." Silence from the investor regarding the product. I flipped to the next page. Exhibit C, the sworn affidavit from Aunt Clara. My mother gasped. "Clara? You spoke to Clara?" "Aunt Clara calls me every week," I said. "Unlike you, she actually asks how I am. She sent me copies of your financial statements. You're not just behind on the mortgage, Dad. You're insolvent. You've been leveraging the house to pay for the country club and Madison's lifestyle for 3 years. That traitor, Catherine hissed. And finally, I said, reaching into the folder for the plastic bag, inside was the original $5,000 check. Exhibit D, the check itself. I held it up. You see, Dad, you made a mistake. You're arrogant. You think you're untouchable, so you get sloppy. I pointed to the memo line on the check. In Richard's distinct, spiky handwriting, it read, "Severance, final payment." Severance, I read aloud, final payment. In the state of Illinois and in the eyes of the IRS, this designates a termination of a relationship, not the commencement of a partnership. By writing this, you legally defined this money as a payoff to make me go away. You explicitly disowned any connection to my future earnings. Sarah, I called out to the speakerphone, what's the legal precedent there? Crystal clear, Sarah said. He signed away his rights to your assets. If he sues, he'll not only lose, but we will countersue for harassment, emotional distress, and we will submit Madison's video as evidence of blackmail. Richard slumped in his chair. He looked old. Suddenly, he wasn't the terrifying patriarch anymore. He was just a broke, sad man in a suit he couldn't afford. Grace, he whispered, please, we're going to lose the house. I know, I said. I looked at them. I looked at Madison, who was frantically deleting comments on her phone. I looked at my mother, who was twisting her pearls so hard I thought the string would snap. I looked at my father, defeated. I felt a surge of emotion, but it wasn't pity. It was justice. You wanted me to leave, I said softly. You wanted me to be a stranger. Well, Dad, strangers don't pay your mortgage. I stood up. Security will escort you out. If you contact me again, Sarah will file a restraining order. And Madison? Madison looked up, mascara running down her face again. If you ever post about me again, I said, I will buy the platform you're posting on and ban you myself. I turned my back on them and walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. I heard the door close. I heard the silence return to the room. It was the most beautiful silence I had ever heard. The silence in the conference room after my family left didn't last long. It was broken by the buzzing of my phone, a vibration so constant it made the heavy oak table hum. I didn't look at it immediately. I just stood there staring at the empty chairs where my parents had sat. The leather still bore the impressions of their bodies. The air still held the faint, cloying scent of my mother's Chanel No. 5, a smell that used to make me feel small and invisible. Now it just smelled like desperation. Grace, Sarah said from the speakerphone, her voice cutting through the fog. You know this isn't over, right? Narcissists don't retreat, they reload. She was right. My father had left defeated, yes. But Madison had left with her phone in her hand. I picked up my device. The notifications were a waterfall. Madison hadn't just posted a tearful apology. She had pivoted. In the 20 minutes since they had been escorted out of the building by security, she had launched a full-scale digital guerrilla war. I opened Twitter. A new hashtag was trending locally. Hashtag the real Grace Sterling. There were photos. Photos of me from college, looking exhausted and disheveled during finals week, captioned, My sister has always struggled with mental stability. We tried to get her help, but the money changed her. There were screenshots of fake text messages, conversations that never happened, where I was saying horrible things about the farming community, calling farmers uneducated dirt diggers. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was a direct attack on my career, on the very foundation of TerraSense. My entire reputation was built on respect for the agricultural community. I walked back to my office, my heels clicking sharply on the polished concrete. Leo, my assistant, looked up from his desk. His face was pale. "Miss Sterling," he stammered. "Mr. Vance wants to see you. Now." My stomach dropped. Julian Vance was a visionary, but he was also a businessman running a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. He didn't like scandal. If Agricor thought I was a liability, the $8.5 million wouldn't matter. My position, my work, my mission, it could all be gone. I walked into Julian's office. He was standing by the window, looking out at the gray Chicago skyline. On his desk lay a stack of printed emails. "Sit down, Grace," he said. He didn't turn around. I sat. I folded my hands in my lap to stop them from shaking. "Julian, whatever you've seen online, it's a fabrication. My sister is—" "I know who your sister is," Julian interrupted. He turned around. His face was unreadable. He picked up the stack of papers. "These were sent to the board of directors 10 minutes ago. Anonymous tips. Allegations that you stole the TerraSense code from a university lab partner. Allegations that you falsified the Fresno data." I felt the air leave my lungs. "That is a lie. You have my raw data. You have the patent logs." "I know," Julian said. He tossed the papers into the shredder next to his desk. The machine roared to life, chewing up Madison's lies. "I verified your work myself, Grace. I don't care what a desperate influencer says on Instagram." The relief was so intense, I almost collapsed. "However," Julian continued, his voice hardening, "this distraction cannot continue. You are the director of sustainability. We are about to launch a global initiative. I cannot have your family throwing mud at the company every time they need cash." He leaned over the desk, his eyes locking onto mine. "You handled them in the conference room, but you need to finish it. Do whatever you have to do to silence them. Legally. Permanently." "I understand," I said. "Good. Now get back to work." I walked out of his office with a new kind of resolve. Madison thought she could play dirty. She thought she could jeopardize my life's work with a few Photoshop tricks and fake accounts. I went back to my desk and called Sarah. "Sarah," I said, "unleash the hounds." "Music to my ears," Sarah replied. "What's the play?" "Madison is using her platform to libel me and the company. I want a cease and desist sent to every sponsor she has. I want a letter sent to the social media platforms flagging her content for harassment and defamation." "And Sarah?" "Yeah? Find out who holds her debt. Her credit card debt?" "No," I said, looking at the spreadsheet Aunt Clara had sent me. "Her car, her studio equipment, everything she leases to look rich. I want to know who owns it." I spent the rest of the afternoon working, forcing myself to focus on soil composition charts while my legal team dismantled my sister's life. By 5 p.m., the results started coming in. Madison's sponsorship with a detox tea company canceled. Her partnership with a fast fashion brand suspended pending investigation. Her account on TikTok temporarily shadow banned due to mass reporting of harassment. I watched her follower count stall, then drop, but it wasn't enough. As long as they felt safe in that big house, as long as they had their fortress, they would keep attacking. They felt protected by the walls of the Sterling estate. That evening, I got a call from Aunt Clara. "Grace," her voice was a whisper, "you need to know. The bank called the house today. Your father put it on speaker because his hearing is going. They gave him a final notice." "Foreclosure?" I asked. 30 days, Clara said. "Richard is trying to find a private investor to bail him out. He's calling everyone. He's even calling your ex-boyfriend, that nice boy Mark, asking for a loan." My hand tightened around the phone. They were desperate, and desperate animals were dangerous. "Does he have any leads?" "No," Clara said. "Nobody wants to touch his debt. The house is underwater. The market value has dropped because he deferred maintenance for 5 years. The roof is leaking in the east wing. The foundation has cracks. A cracked foundation. How poetic. Clara, I said, an idea forming in my mind. A cold, calculated, beautiful idea. Who holds the mortgage? First National of Chicago, she said. Why? Just curious, I lied. I hung up. I looked at the check framed on my bathroom wall. The $5,000 severance. Leave our house forever. That was their command. But they forgot the golden rule of real estate. He who holds the deed makes the rules. I didn't want to just win the lawsuit. I didn't want to just prove them wrong. I wanted to own the very ground they stood on. I picked up my laptop and drafted an email to my private banker. Subject: Acquisition of distressed asset, Sterling Estate. It was time to go shopping. The meeting at First National Bank took place 3 days later. It was a gray, rainy Thursday, the kind of day that makes Chicago look like a black and white photograph. I sat across from Mr. Henderson, the vice president of loan recovery. He looks tired. Dealing with people like my father, people who believed they were too important to pay their bills, was exhausting work. Miss Sterling, he said, shuffling through a thick stack of documents, I must admit, this is unusual. Usually, we sell these distressed portfolios in bulk to investment firms. Buying a single non-performing note, it's risky. I'm familiar with the property, I said, keeping my face neutral. I know the risks. He looked at me over his glasses. You know the current owners are difficult? We've been trying to evict them for 6 months. Mr. Sterling keeps filing emergency motions to delay. He claims he has imminent capital coming in. He doesn't, I said. The only capital he had was his reputation, and he spent that years ago. Mr. Henderson sighed. The outstanding balance is $1.2 million, plus $80,000 in arrears and legal fees. The appraisal came in at $1.5 million, but with the market cooling and the condition of the property, I'll pay the full arrears and the principal, I said, cash, today. Mr. Henderson froze. He dropped his pen. Today? Wire transfer is ready, I said. On one condition. Which is? I want the transfer of the deed recorded immediately, and I want the bank to step aside. I will handle the foreclosure proceedings myself. He smiled. It was the smile of a man who had just been relieved of a massive headache. Miss Sterling, if you transfer those funds today, you can go over there and change the locks yourself for all I care. I signed the papers. Grace Sterling. Owner, 4 Privet Drive. The address wasn't really Privet Drive, but in my head, my parents were the Dursleys, and I was the wizard they locked under the stairs. The wire transfer cleared in 10 minutes. I walked out of the bank with a thick folder of legal documents. I owned it. I owned the room where Madison filmed her videos. I owned the dining room where my father had handed me that check. I owned the garden where I had been humiliated in front of Mrs. Vanderselt. I drove to my apartment, but I couldn't sit still. I paced the floor. I called Sarah. It's done, I said. You bought the house? Sarah asked, her voice a mix of awe and terror. Grace, that is biblical-level petty. I love it. What are my rights? Can I kick them out today? Technically, you're the landlord now, Sarah explained. Since the bank accelerated the foreclosure, they are essentially squatters. You can serve them with a notice to quit. Give them 72 hours. If they don't leave, the sheriff comes. 72 hours? I repeated. Or, Sarah paused, you could offer them a lease. Why would I do that? Because eviction is quick pain, Sarah said, her lawyer brain working. A lease is control. If you evict them, they play the victim card. Our daughter threw us on the street. But if you let them stay, under your rules, You own them. I thought about it. I thought about my father's pride. I thought about Madison's vanity. What was worse for Richard Sterling, living in a small apartment knowing he failed, or living in his own mansion knowing he was a tenant to the daughter he called a failure? Draft the lease, I said. Any specific terms? Sarah asked. I looked at the framed check on my wall. Yes, a few specific terms. Saturday morning, the day of the confrontation. I didn't go alone. I brought Sarah. And I brought 2 off-duty police officers I had hired for private security. I wasn't taking chances with my father's temper. We pulled up to the gate. The iron S on the gate was rusting. The landscaping was overgrown. It looked like a fading empire. I punched in the code. It still worked. We drove up the long driveway. My father's Mercedes was there, but it was dusty. Madison's leased BMW was gone, repossessed yesterday, according to my reports. I walked up the steps, the same steps I had walked down with my one-way ticket. I rang the bell. It took a long time. Finally, the door opened. It was my mother. She looked haggard. She was wearing a bathrobe at 11 a.m. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Then they narrowed when she saw the police officers behind me. "Grace," she hissed, "what are you doing here? Did you come to gloat, or did you come to apologize?" "I came to inspect my property," I said. "Your what?" "Arthur!" she screamed, turning back into the house. "Arthur! She's here, and she brought the police!" My father came running into the foyer. He was wearing rumpled suit trousers and a stained shirt. "You!" He pointed a shaking finger at me. "Get off my property. I'll call the cops. I'll have you arrested for trespassing." "Actually," Sarah stepped forward, holding up a document. "Officers, would you mind verifying this deed?" One of the officers, a large man named Officer Miller, took the document. He scanned it. He looked at my father. "Mr. Sterling," Officer Miller said, "according to the county recorder, this property belongs to a Miss Grace Sterling, dated 2 days ago." "That's impossible," my father shouted. "The bank! I'm in negotiations with the bank." "The bank sold the note, Dad," I said calmly. "To me." My father staggered back against the wall. He looked like he had been shot. Madison appeared at the top of the stairs, looking down. She was pale, no makeup, wearing sweatpants. "You bought the house?" Madison whispered. "I did," I said. I stepped into the foyer, my foyer, and now we need to discuss your living arrangements. "You're kicking us out," my mother began to sob. "After everything we did for you, raising you, loving you." "Stop," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it echoed in the high-ceilinged hall. "Save the performance." "There are no cameras here." I walked into the living room and sat on the white sofa, the one I was never allowed to sit on as a child because I might dirty it. I crossed my legs. "I'm not kicking you out," I said. They looked up, hope flickering in their eyes. The parasites smelled a fresh host. "We can stay?" Richard asked, straightening his spine, trying to regain some dignity. "Well, that is the least you could do. It's good you recognize your duty to your family." "I have a lease prepared," I said, gesturing to Sarah. Sarah slapped 3 thick packets onto the coffee table. "A lease?" Madison asked. "Yes," I said. "You didn't think you were staying for free, did you?" My father stared at the document labeled Residential Lease Agreement. "I am not signing this," he spat. "I am not paying rent to my own daughter in my own house." "It's not your house," I corrected him gently. "And if you don't sign, the officers here will oversee your eviction. You have until 5 p.m. to vacate. I hear the homeless shelter downtown fills up quickly on weekends." He looked at the officers. They stood impassive, arms crossed. He looked at my mother, who was weeping silently into her hands. He looked at Madison, who looked like a ghost. He picked up the lease. "Let's go over the terms," I said. "Rent," I began. "The market value for this estate is $8,000 a month. However, since you are family, I'm charging you $5,000. My father flinched. The number was intentional. "5,000, he muttered. "Yes, exactly the amount you gave me to leave." "Poetic, isn't it?" "We don't have that kind of income," my mother wailed. "Your father is retired. Madison is in between opportunities." "Then I suggest you get jobs," I said. "Real jobs, not consulting or influencing. I see help wanted signs everywhere." "Grace, please," Madison begged. "I can't work at a store. People know me." "Then they'll know you're a hard worker," I said. Clause 2. No commercial activity on the premises without landlord approval. That means no filming, Madison, no YouTube studios, no TikTok dances in the foyer. This is a residence, not a set. Madison gasped. "You're killing my career." "Your career of bullying me is over," I said. Clause 3. The landlord reserves the right to inspect the property monthly. I will be coming by to check on the roof, the foundation, and the garden. I looked at my father. Speaking of the garden, the landscaping service has been canceled to save costs. You are responsible for maintaining the grounds. "Me?" my father sputtered. "You expect me to mow the lawn?" "And weed the flower beds," I added. "I remember you saying that gardening is good, honest work for slow people. I'm sure you'll find it therapeutic." My father's face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. He was being reduced to the very thing he had mocked me for being. Clause 4, I continued, my voice dropping lower. No guests, no parties, no galas. If I hear of a single white party or charity dinner being hosted here to keep up appearances, the lease is void and you are out. This was the final blow. Their social status was their oxygen. I was cutting off the supply. "You are cruel," my mother whispered. "You are a monster." "No, Mother," I said, standing up. "I'm a businesswoman, and I'm protecting my asset." I uncapped a pen and placed it next to the lease. "Sign it, or pack. You have 5 minutes." The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. The clock on the mantel ticked. Tick, tick, tick. My father looked at the room around him. He looked at the crystal chandelier, the paintings of ancestors he lied about being related to, the illusion of grandeur he had built his life upon. He couldn't leave it. He would rather be a slave in a palace than a free man in a shack. With a shaking hand, Richard Sterling picked up the pen. He signed. Catherine signed. Madison signed. I took the papers. I checked the signatures. "Welcome to your new home," I said. "Rent is due on the 1st. Don't be late. I charge a late fee." I walked toward the door. "Oh, and Dad?" He looked up, broken. "The lock on the pool house," I said. "Fix it. I might want to store some gardening tools in there." I walked out of the house. The sun had come out. The overgrown garden didn't look shameful anymore. It looked like a project. And for the first time in 32 years, I didn't feel heavy. I felt weightless. 6 months have passed since I became the landlord of the Sterling estate. My life has changed in ways I couldn't have imagined. I live in a townhouse in the city now, closer to the AgriCorps headquarters. It's filled with light, plants, and friends who actually like me. Julian and I aren't just colleagues anymore. He's become a mentor and a close friend. Sarah comes over for wine every Friday. We toast to the receipts. I used the rest of my buyout money to start a scholarship fund, the Sterling Grant for Agricultural Innovation. It's specifically for students who come from non-supportive backgrounds, kids who were told their dreams were dirty or small. But once a month, I drive out to the suburbs to inspect my property. I pulled up to the gate yesterday. The grass was a little uneven, but it was cut. I parked the car and walked around the back. There he was, Richard Sterling. He was wearing baggy khakis and a straw hat. He was on his knees pulling weeds from the rose bushes. He looked thinner. The arrogance was gone from his posture. When he saw me, he didn't sneer. He didn't boast. He just nodded. "Afternoon, Grace." "Afternoon, Richard," I said. I stopped calling him Dad. Dad is a title you earn. "You missed a spot near the hydrangeas." "I'll get to it," he mumbled, wiping sweat from his brow. Inside, the house was quiet. The curtains were drawn to save on air conditioning bills. They pay their own utilities now, and they are thrifty. My mother was in the kitchen. She wasn't planning a gala. She was clipping coupons. She made me tea. It was Earl Grey. "How is work?" she asked. It was polite, stiff, but real. She asked because she was afraid not to. "Work is good," I said. "We just launched the vertical farming project in Detroit." "That's nice," she said. She looked at her hands. "We saw you on the news. You looked professional." It was the closest thing to a compliment she could muster. And Madison? I drove past the local Starbucks on my way out of town. I went through the drive-thru. A hand extended out the window with my latte. The nails were short, unpolished. "Here's your order," a familiar voice said. I looked up. Madison was wearing the green apron. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun. She looked tired. She looked real. "Hi, Madison," I said. She froze. For a second, I saw the old flare of anger, but then she looked at my car. A nice, reliable, new SUV. She looked at the peace in my eyes. "Hi, Grace," she said softly. "That'll be $5.45. I handed her a 20. "Keep the change," I said. She didn't throw it back. She didn't make a snarky comment. She put it in the tip jar. "Thanks," she muttered. I drove away. I realized then that I hadn't just punished them. In a strange, twisted way, I had saved them. My father was finally doing an honest day's work. My mother was finally living within her means. Madison was finally learning the value of $1. They were miserable, perhaps, but they were becoming decent human beings, forced by the anvil of necessity. I didn't hate them anymore. I didn't love them either. They were just people. People who rented a house I owned, people who served as a reminder of where I came from and how far I had gone. I drove toward the city, the skyline glittering in the distance. My phone pinged. A text from Julian. "Meeting with the UN delegation starts in 20. You ready?" I smiled. I touched the passenger seat where my old gardening gloves sat. I was born ready. They called me the disappointment daughter. They called me a failure. They gave me a one-way ticket to oblivion. But they forgot one thing about seeds. You can bury them in the dirt. You can cover them with mud. You can leave them in the dark. But if the core is strong, that is exactly where they grow best. My name is Grace Sterling. I am a gardener, and I just harvested my life. Thank you. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt buried by the people who were supposed to raise you up, please type the letter A in the comments. Let me know you're still growing. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. See you in the next one.